Welcome to Imperative Ministries Business and Spirituality Podcast. In each episode, we discuss matters of spirituality and how they relate to the world of business. Since people are comprised of mind, soul, and spirit, we will also take a look at subjects such as mental and physical health. Thank you for joining host Michael McIlwain as he interviews people whose life experiences provide an opportunity for learning and inspiration.
And there in its circle, while flowers did grow, bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Tell other people that Jesus loves them so. Tell them how he came to earth and died to set them free. And bloom where you are planted, wherever that might be. Well, hello, everyone. This is Michael McIlwain with Imperative Ministries. So glad you've joined us today. We have a new friend here, Michaela Cox, who is going to share with us about her ministry and what God has done in her life, and also how he can help you through some difficult moments. COVID and the economy struggling. I know there's many people discouraged, but I want you to know that there's a way through all these difficulties, and Michaela has lived through many and has come out on the other side and is fighting the good fight, and I think has a lot of good information to help us. And I am looking forward to learning, because even this old man here still has things to learn about how to overcome. So welcome, Michaela. Good to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. And yes, knowledge is power. As long as we're always learning and growing, and making progress, we're moving in the right direction.
I tell my children that. I know you have children as well.
Yes.
And my younger ones, who are, they're not so young anymore, 16 and 12, but
I'm headed that direction. My daughter's 11 in middle school for the first year, so I'm getting
right.
And I have an 8-year-old, so I'll be doing that for the next 10 years. Lord, help me get through the next decade.
Well, I have one that's almost 24, so she's. People wonder why does the oldest get, and I'm an oldest child myself. Why do they get some breaks and others don't? I said, because parents mess up with us, whereas we learn better with the younger ones what to do and not to do.
And we get wiser, hopefully, and figure it out better. There's a reason why there's this funny thing on Facebook I've seen. First child, oh my gosh, your nose is bleeding. Fourth child, if you get blood on my carpet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's by the end.
The more you have, the further you go along. So
well, our baby was that way. If she picked up something off the floor to eat, we weren't panicked like we were with the oldest, So that's like, now I find that the younger ones grow up a little quicker too, because they get to be around older kids. And
if you have an older sibling, your siblings' older friends are around too. So, it's not just.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So, and it's a wild journey. I tell you, I don't regret having children, and they keep me young. I don't look young, but they keep me young, and
they keep you on your toes too, because you never know what's coming.
That's right, especially when they're little. I have a 2-year-old at church who, and we don't have a full-blown nursery, but I told the grandma, let her come on into church. I can preach over, and she's. I did joke with her the other day. I said, "Now, if you keep being loud during my sermons, I'm going to have to come to your house and make noise while you watch cartoons." So, but no, she's my buddy. She's was even sitting with me during the Thanksgiving dinner and meal, and chose to sit with me. And so our church has embraced her, because children are so important. There's a place for them to have their own time together, but really, she's really an inspiration.
The Gospels, but Jesus got a little annoyed with the disciples when he's like, "Let the children come to me." We got to teach them and instill in them. So, I'm sure I know where it's at. I'm just not thinking it off the top of my head right now. Sorry.
No, you're right. No, that's suffer the Lord. Let the little children come to me. Such is the kingdom of heaven. That is exactly right. Well, I know that you've had your some challenges in your life, and yet you've overcome those. And when I don't say overcome, I'm sure you're still overcoming them. It's not that we ever
It's a process. It's it's a journey. I'm still dealing with some of it. So some days are better than others. You figure it out the more you figure out, the easier it gets. And then, oh, you thought you had it figured out, and like the next day brings something, like, okay, I'm figuring this out too. Just add it to the list. So
As you talk to people about these things, and we'll get into your challenges, and have you found maybe a different response between professing Christians and maybe non-believers? Have you found maybe that Christians sometimes struggle a little bit more with why aren't things easier or better, or if you
I
found
think
maybe
we all struggle with those questions because we want those answers. And I mean, scripture, even though people may not be faith-based and they may not understand that, but scripture itself tells you that you're not always going to understand.
right. I guess I had worked at a restaurant last summer, and were mostly unconverted people, but I did find that they were more open to the sufferings of Jesus and found comfort in that, whereas sometimes the believer was more frustrated because they've listened to a gospel that says, if you serve Jesus, everything should just be okay and you should live in victory.
Now
And it's
that's true. I do think if you're taught that, it becomes a point of frustration for you, and it is inaccurate.
That's right.
I mean, Christ himself, the most perfect human being that ever walked the face of the earth, suffered. So why do we think we're above that and not going to go through suffering? I mean, that is the whole nature of the fallen world we live in. I talk, if someone listens to my demo on the speaker website that I sent you, I say it: cancer, financial troubles, chronic illness, childhood illnesses, disability, divorce, whatever, this long list of varied situations and suffering. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. We're not going to get out of this life unscathed. We're going to go through something, and unfortunately, for better or for worse, we're probably going to go through more than one.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I've been telling my family, embrace the difficulty and don't get frustrated about it. Enjoy the beautiful moments when they're there and soak it up, but there'll be another struggle and God will help us through it.
Yeah.
He said he'd never leave us or forsake us. So, well, tell us a little bit about your background and maybe what led you to start your ministry. And I think it's beyond, it is a ministry, but I think you do some motivational speaking and you've written books, and like God has, as I had a professor in college, actually it was a guest speaker in the Christian college I attended. He preached on Romans 8:28. He preached out of the New American Standard Bible, and it said, that's what all things work together for good. But that translation said, God takes all things and works them together for good. And he reiterated that everything is not good, but God takes them and works them together and brings good out of them. So I think that maybe applies to things you've been through. Elaborate a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background.
It does, and I don't want it to be misunderstood. I'm not here saying I have all the answers, that I'm perfect, and know it all. No, I don't know it all, and I have overcome a lot, but I'm also figuring out a lot to try and still keep overcoming, because it's a process. It's not like you overcome something like, okay, that's done. It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Well, that's helpful, because I think that some people think, even as Christians, oh, I know I have some trials. I've worked through that. I'll never have to deal with that again. I think that part of the true love waits problem, and I think there was good in that movement, but part of the problem was,
I remember that movement. I knew all about it when I was growing up, because that was during the time period of when I was coming up through youth group, and I even had a true love waits ring. I still have it. So yeah, I know that movement.
But some of them, and there was good in it, but at the same time, some thought, well, if I'll just do this, I'll have this happy marriage and never have any difficulty. And well, it doesn't guarantee that, it doesn't.
I thought that when I was a kid, and I did that. I waited until I got married the first time, and we'll get into that in a minute. I was a virgin when I got married the first time, and that first marriage did not go the way I thought it was going to go, and it was not my happily ever after, and it did not work the way I thought and envisioned that it would work, even though I did my best to do all the right things. It did not go that way. That's why I'm divorced.
Yes. Well, and there's no shame in that, because sometimes it isn't, the other person may not. I mean, I know of some ladies who did the right thing, married, and the guys were either monsters or abusive, and they had to get out of that, and that's right. And I had a pastor that helped me with that. He said, some people said, well, isn't adultery the only thing in the Bible that and he said, no, beating somebody is walking away from your marital vows. It is not upholding to love, honor, and cherish.
And when I was going through that time period in my life, because I was not taught, I was not raised to believe in divorce. Like my parents have just like tomorrow's gonna be their 47th wedding anniversary. And until my generation, you didn't get divorced in our family. I have a cousin that's divorced too and remarried, but until our generation of the granddaughters is one, my cousins, there was no divorce in our family. We weren't raised that way. But my counselor at the time, when I was going through the separation period of trying to figure out, do I try and get back with my husband, the first one, or do I leave him? She said, the reason why God hates divorce is because it hurts and it doesn't protect us. And his law is there to protect us. But if in trying to abide in a law of God is not protecting you, do you really think he would want you to be unprotected just to stay in a marriage?
Right.
That was a light bulb moment for me. I was like, I ended the struggle over my decision about whether I divorced my first husband or not. And that was so empowering and was like a burden lifted, because it really helped me understand that I'm not a horrible Christian or doubting my faith or, not being a woman of my word or not being a woman of my faith just because I have to walk away for something that became untenable.
That's a good point. That is, I know a lady who was married to a guy who was mentally ill and just, damaged a lot of her furniture, was very scary to live with. And her pastor was fussing at her when she divorced him. And it's just like, look, I couldn't live in that. And, she was in danger. And, there's more to the marital life. Certainly God hates divorce because it does cause a lot of problems, but he doesn't say, I hate those who get divorced.
Right, exactly. And mine wasn't a physical abusive situation, but there were other issues that some people might say were mentally or verbally abusive or emotionally abusive, depending on your perspective. I'm not going to delve into the black and white or grayness of those issues. And there was other issues going on at the time that were not what we're supposed to be. Like he had an addiction online to pornography, and we had intimacy issues, but that's another whole story. But it just became to a point where it just wasn't working, and he wasn't willing to do what it took to fix it. And so I decided I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. So
the key is
that's probably too much TMI. I apologize.
No, because I think that's helpful. There's again, that's the key is repentance. Yes, we've heard wonderful stories of God bringing people together, but people repented.
And they chose to want to delve in and do the work together. It takes two. You can't make one person, you can lead them to the water, but you can't make them drink it.
That's right.
And you can't be in control of their choices. And if one of it takes two or three in a marriage, meaning if you think of it as like God's a part of it, which he is, but if one of those people are choosing not to, then it will never work and it won't matter what you do.
As a pastor, I've learned my heart aches for people when they make the wrong decision, but I've had to realize I can't make them make the right decision. I just can't do it,
No, you can't.
There's
you gotta love that free will.
You do. I mean, there's God is ordering and working all things, but and I was telling my people, I live in that. I've had some Reformed teachings, and yet I've come out of Pentecostalism, and I live in that tension between free will and predestination election. Yes. I said, where is it? There's a tension there. It's not God is ordering things, but you're free. That's right.
Both are scriptural. There's teaching. There's evidence and proof of both teachings in scripture. That's why there's a tension, because it can be confusing.
That's right. And so let them pull you, but you're right. You can't make somebody else do something. And even with children, sometimes they'll say, well, my children are musical and like music, but they don't follow it the way I do. And I said, well, man, if I really failed my kids because I don't make them, they've played instruments and been in the band, but my son chose basketball over band last year. And I have to say, well, they're not me though. I was worrying people to death when I was their age. Please let me sing. Please let me do something. Well, they like it, but they don't like it the way I liked it.
We're all unique individuals that are created differently with different gifts and different talents and different interests. And we have to find what ours is and use them accordingly to the way we were designed and created and purposed for. So it takes all different kinds.
It does. And I was seeing, you did mention you'd seen a counselor, and I think sometimes Christians wrestle with that. And as a pastor, I tell our people, I have counselors I can send you to. I will pray with you and I will counsel with you up to a point, but there's just some things I'm not trained to deal with. And
I love counseling. It's a good week when I see my counselor. I'm like, thank God.
Yes.
Amen. Praise Jesus. Thank the Lord. And I'm not ashamed, and I will not feel guilty about it. And no one can convince me otherwise. I've been in counseling off and on for various different things, probably since 2001, because that was the beginning of my first marriage, and we were in counseling trying to resolve our issues. And then when I got divorced, I had to resolve my issues from getting
Yes,
divorced.
that's right.
And then,
We do.
issues with my disability. And then ever since then, off and on trying to work through that and other things in my life. I told you I didn't have all the answers. I'm not perfect.
No.
And
None
then
of us do. That's right. And I think that's the problem.
2017, I've definitely stayed in counseling to deal with my journey of grief and loss of the death of my husband and the father of my children. So,
Did
and
you
being a
find
solo
that the
mom.
pastors or whatever that you certain churches that you attended, were they supportive of the counseling, or did they? Some people are looking solely to their pastors to help them, but they are fallible people too and do not have all the answers. And that's why I send my people to counselors, because they're trained,
Right.
better to work
And
through
there's
some
so many
things.
different, if you're come from an academic standpoint, the things that you can do in counseling, there's so many different modalities and different types of counseling that can help specific needs and ways of, I guess, living out that counseling, depending on what that client needs, that it can be very varied within the field of counseling, depending on what you're trained in and what your framework is from a theoretical standpoint and how you want to use theory to influence how you help your clients. So it's a wide range and field too, as well.
Yes.
No, I've never had any problems with people supporting me going to counseling. So
good. That's, and I'm seeing more and more Christians go there. And there's some anti-counseling people that'll say, well, you're not really trusting the Lord or listening to your spiritual leaders, but
no, especially if you're going to Christian counseling, you're still, if someone chooses to go to counseling that's faith-based or Christian counseling, you're still implementing the ideas of your beliefs to guide that counseling session. Yes. Which is why some people choose Christian counseling, because that's fundamental to them and they want that to be an influence that guides what the counsel they are getting. And so that it's not walking away from your faith or doubting your faith or not giving credence to it. And all it is being willing to say, okay, I need more resources than someone may be able to give me. So I'm going to expand it. Yes. To be able to achieve what I need to be able to do what I feel like I'm supposed to do or where I need to be. And furthermore, this whole thing about not, as Christians, we're not supposed to, we forget sometimes, and I think the church does, depending on where you're at, excuse me, we were created with brains and intelligence and knowledge and learning. So it's not wrong to go to a doctor to get a prescription. God gave us the brain to create these amazing things that we do in medicine and science. So how is going to seek someone for counsel that can help you with whatever's going on with you any different than if you went to go get a prescription for Walgreens for a cold or, I don't know, the flu or whatever.
That's
fill in the blank. And those all come from God because he created us with the abilities to do these things. So I always thought that whole theory was asinine, but that's just me.
Yes, no, I agree with you. And I've also found, you talk about the brain, that, there's also mental health is a big thing with me, because a lot of it is, and I think you said that you've in the process of writing a book that deals with some of this. The Romans 12 speaks of the renewing of the mind, and certainly changing behaviors can help renew the mind. But I found out that throughout my family tree, especially on my mother's side of the family, but I know it's true on my dad's side too, because the McIlwains were, at least our group was a pretty high-strung group of people. Many are also taking some type of anxiety medication.
A lot of things come down to genetics or family tree, or even just simple brain chemistry, that the only thing that can really truly fix it, especially if it's the issue of brain chemistry, is a medication to help sort out your brain chemistry to get it back where it's supposed to be, even if it's short term, just to get your baseline normal so that you can process correctly.
I'm a more spiritual, better leader because of some medication that I take that deals with anxiety and a little bit of depression too. And it helps with that some. But I can tell you about it running in family trees. I coached some kids in Upward Ball a few years ago that they were very laid back family. I mean, they were talented, the kids were, but man, to fire them up and get them motivated was hard because they were low key. I mean, they were just, they were just, you like to see a little fired passion, and it was hard, but that was just their genetics. That was how they were, God wired their brain, and then you got other people you're having to calm down or refocus. And that was a challenge. It was
like I said, it takes all kinds. So,
it does. I'm so ADHD, and that has hurt me in areas of my life. But I also see that it's been something that people have been attracted to, that energy that even at my age I still have. And
a lot of times what appears to be a challenge, which not saying that it's not a challenge, because as we dive into my challenges, they're definitely challenges, but you can still make that challenge work for you to your advantage and seek how that challenge might still give you strengths that you can use to your benefit to further whatever you're working on or what you're supposed to be doing. And which do a lot to do with mindset, which we'll get into in a minute, but anyway.
Why don't we dive into that just a moment? You have, like I say, the I think you have part of your website, part of your movement. You have the 38 DDD, and I'm sure 38 is probably dealing with you were 38, I think, with the death of your love of your life.
Yep. It came about as what I call it, the 38 triple D. It's not a bra size. It's not my physical appearance.
No, that's right.
Maybe when I was pregnant, but no.
Right, I got you.
I don't know what I was when I was pregnant. I didn't measure, but I digress. But it's something to describe the journey of going from much tribulation to thriving in all things. And the 3Ds that I'm referring to in that little, way of expressing it is, the first D was lifelong disability of legal blindness. The second D was divorce by 26. And the third D was death and loss of my beloved husband, who I remarried after getting to, I married a second husband after getting divorced by the age of 38. So I'd been through 3 major Ds: disability, divorce, and death by the age of 38. And if you want me to start from the beginning, I can, with what all those mean and what that's looked like in my life, or you can, or do you have a question?
I think all of those hit somebody in some way. I mean, we've again, disabilities aren't, actually, may not be exactly what you have, but I think there's more people have these, and seems like I'm hearing of even more strokes and things. My wife was a victim of a stroke 2 years ago. Saw that Timothy, I probably said his name wrong, the guy that was on Psych. We were watching the Psych movie the other day with the family, and he's still recovering some from his elements of stroke. And I think more people have that, and certainly people have dealt with divorce and upheaval in their life, and people have certainly dealt with death of not just physical death of a loved one, but sometimes we have death of our dreams, death of our careers. And so just anywhere you'd like to begin with that, maybe touch on some of those and how.
Well, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I was born in Texas. I'm a Texas girl.
All right.
I wish to have lived there longer, but I moved away from Texas when I was 10, but I was born in Houston in 78. Yes, I'm showing my age. I'm 43.
You're still young.
Just turned 43. That doesn't feel like it some days, but thank you.
That's right.
Just turned 43 in November. But I was born actually totally blind. It was a fluke. There was no genetics. Like, no one in my family had that issue. There was no medical explanation as to why. There was no explanation as to why I'm now seeing. And what happened was, when I was 7 months old, my family, because we are faith-based and are, believers and Christians and whatnot, that we believe God did a miracle in allowing me to be granted my sight, where I do see and have seen for the majority of my life, except for the first 7 months. But even though I do see, it is still impaired and, limited. And there is issues that come with that. And I am considered legally blind, even though I do physically see. So, and I've had that my whole entire life. I've never taken a breath, or will take a breath, or lived a day, or will live a day where that's not been the case. It's permanent, unless God decides to do another miracle, which I'm not saying he will or he won't. But as now, as far as we know, there's nothing medically on earth physically that can be done about it. So,
Got you.
I mean, anything's possible, but I just want to, from a scientific standpoint, I want to make it clear that it's not going anywhere.
But I think you have to face that, because it's like even Johnny Erickson Tyler that had her diving accident. I mean, she's been a great inspiration, and yet life's been difficult. God chose not to, not to heal her of that. That's I had a friend of mine who was a pastor who was in a wheelchair, and I remember we were attending a youth rally at a ball field, and I saw this guy, cameraman from one of the local stations, would come over and pray with him, and things got pretty intense for a moment. And after it was over, I asked him, "What's wrong?" I could tell he was upset. He said, "Well, the guy was praying for me, and I could tell he was trying to pull me up out of the wheelchair." This guy had come to grips with the fact that God may never heal him. This other guy couldn't. It's like, "I'm gonna pray for you, and God's gonna get you up out of this." Like, well, Not
If it
always the way it
wants
works.
to. That's always the way it works. There's a reason for
Yeah.
what we go through, whether we understand it or not.
Paul had a thorn in the flesh,
Yep.
could be ADHD or ADD, or it could be, so many things, depression. I mean, I have truly godly people I know who wrestle with depression, and they love Jesus and they're trying to serve him,
Yep.
but they wrestle with that,
And so growing up with a disability didn't come without challenges, even though I mean, school, I'm intellectually very good and smart, I'd like to think, in what I do,
Yes.
but the work that it takes to do it is very time consuming and involves a lot of extra steps than someone who does not have a disability. And so academically, I grew up with a lot of challenges of what I had to do to get around what I had to do in school to do well in it. And then I also had social challenges of it, because we know kids can be very cruel. And It was no secret. I was the redhead visually impaired girl. There was no getting around. No, it was not a secret. It was very obvious to everybody. So
Yes.
most of my academic career, kindergarten through 12th grade, either had academic issues or social issues or both or whatever. So it did not come without challenges. I promise you that.
Right. And like you say, even though I can tell you're bright, I can tell that I really can tell you're very intelligent, but like you said, it came with challenges because you probably couldn't, use the normal resources all the time.
No, you can't. And what the root cause of my vision, if there's any medical professionals out there listening to your podcast, are going to think the way I'm fixing to explain this is probably ludicrous, because I'm not medical. I'm very layperson. Right. The root cause of my vision issues is that my optic nerve is totally jacked up. I mean, totally screwed up. And it's called optic nerve atrophy or atrophy. And what that means is, if you've ever seen in an eye doctor's office or in a biology or anatomy and physiology course, a graph or a picture of the optic nerves are supposed to be purple. And optic nerves are supposed to be a certain shape. Mine are not. Mine are as pale as they can be, a vanilla folder. Matter of fact, I read in one of my documentations that my original pediatrician, like, I can't find her optic nerve. Like, she's never going to be able to see. She doesn't have an optic nerve. Well, I had optic nerves, but they were just so pale, they were almost undetectable.
Right.
And they're the wrong shape. So what that means in real life is the way the blood is able to go through the optic nerve, it does not. So it's a lot of delayed processing and inability to process, and able to tell the brain what it's supposed to be perceiving, to send the receptors to the eyes to take in what they're supposed to be taking in. And then you add nearsightedness, astigmatism, nystagmatism, and not very good peripheral and not very good depth perception. No, I do not drive. That is legal blindness and driving do not mix. Not good.
That's right. Well, you're probably better driver than some people that drive out there. So
yeah, but still not a good idea.
No, that's, I got you.
I've always had to be able to find different ways of doing things and work around not being able to see. I mean, they say 90% of our knowledge comes from our visual, and when your visual is screwed up and you're having to find alternate ways to process the world different from everybody else, it makes it kind of interesting.
And you're not like a can-do person. That's sort of my personality. My wife is opposite of me. I had cooked part of Thanksgiving dinner at the church. We have a small oven that just won't accommodate everything. So I take things to the church and make some things. And of course, I did a big boo-boo and laid a hot pan down on we had a tablecloth, but it was anyway, I should have had a cup, I should have had some kind of a pot holder up under it. I didn't do it. And so some of it stuck to it. And my wife was like, look, we're never going to get this off. I'm like, yeah, we will. There's a workaround. And sure enough, WD-40 oil and other things, and it peeled off. And it was done. It's clean. It's fine. I saved it. But it takes all different kinds of people. But yes, you have to overcome obstacles. And I'm one of those kind of people that I don't tend to take no for an answer. Now, sometimes Lord reminds me, yes, you will. If I don't,
right,
my plan for you, you will. That's so.
I mean, a lot of people ask me, well, because throughout my life, over the last 43 years, I've gone to high school. I've graduated with a reasonable, decent GPA. I went to Louisiana Tech in Louisiana and got my BA in sociology, double minor English and history. No, I cannot just do one thing. With not as good as a GPA as I would have liked, but a decent GPA. My perfectionist feathers were very ruffled over my college GPA. And then I go on to, get married and divorced. And I would marry my second husband, and we moved to New Hampshire. And then I would go massage therapy school, and I'd get my master's and have a really good GPA in that one. I was very proud of that GPA because that was not what I've never been able to do it before. And I'll explain that in a minute, why that was such a big deal. And then I've now since published 9 books, and I'm raising 2 kids.
Yes.
Back then it was with my husband, but now not with my husband. And yet I'm still legally blind doing all of it. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but I'm saying it to make a point and to also bring attention to God's grace and blessing and favor and my hard work. I was raised because back in 78, even though we don't know all the medical knowledge that we could know now, they definitely didn't know what we know now. And so the doctors told my parents, she'll probably never be able to do this. She'll never be able to do this. We won't look for her to do this. And my parents didn't really buy into that.
Amen.
They thought, well, God did a miracle and gave her sight, and we believe he'll help her and we'll get through this or whatever. And so why don't we just see what she can do and see where she takes it and let her do it? And so I was raised with the idea and beliefs of you don't quit, you don't stop, you don't give up, and you do your best. And that's what I've always done. And so I'm not sure if this will be just audio or video, but if you can see me, I have red hair and I'm a Texan and I'm a Southern girl and I'm a Scorpio. And basically what that means is I live up to that reputation. I don't take no for an answer. If you tell me no, probably means it's going to happen. You just pretty much guaranteed it's going to happen. And I'm going to find some way to come do it. Come hell or high water. I don't know an edit for that expression.
No, that's all right.
And I also believe in, hold my beer or your can of grape juice or glass of tea, whatever you want to do, and sit back and watch me because I'm probably going to do it. Excuse me. And so I've been very determined. I've been very tenacious, very persistent, all those things. Some people call it stubbornness, maybe a little too stubborn sometimes, but it's allowed me to be determined to say, okay, this sucks. I have this issue, but I'm going to do what I have to do to accomplish what I feel like I'm supposed to set out and do.
That's right.
And that's how I did that with a disability, through all of those things. And there are some things I will honestly never be able to do. You can't change the fact that it is ill-advisable, illegal, and unsmart for me to be on the road driving. That's just stupid. Okay. There is not a thing I can do about that. But other than things like that shouldn't happen, really shouldn't happen. It's not smart. But if I can find a way around it, I'm not going to let it stand in my way and stop me. So I found ways in school with help and resources and support of family and other things of the administration or whatever, depending on what we're talking about. I had accommodations. Back in the day, they were called individual lesson plans or learning plans. And now I don't know what they're called. I had accommodations. I had extended test time. I had all the things or whatever it was that required to help me, to allow me to do what I needed to do in school. And that's what I've always been willing to do in other aspects of my life as well. So that's why I mentioned that list of things that I've been able to accomplish, is to show what I learned and what I was able to do and why I was able to do it. So.
Well, that's why I hear some older Christian friends say, I wish we could go back to the 1950s. I'm like, no, because it was too much about conforming and everybody looking a certain way and all that. God makes so many people unique and different. And there were a lot of people, I'm convinced, that were left behind because they were, landed maybe as dumb or not intelligent. Because I had a Facebook friend who says he had a 4th grade class. The teacher had 50 students in it. I'm sure that the ones that struggled got no attention, and they were just. He said she ruled with a rod of iron, and that's, again, she probably had to with that many, but that's not where we want to go. There's a lot of good things happening in our world today that some people see all the bad in the world. They don't realize that we have more counseling if you do have problems. There are more resources, right. And I am thankful for that.
People, the reason why they say, oh, back in the day it was better in the 50s or the 60s or whatever, I think it's because they're reminiscing about a time that seemed simpler and a time where there seemed to be better moral fabric and our culture was better and there wasn't as many problems in the ways that we see today. Right. And they're longing for something that was, because it was either sentimentality of their childhood or their family life or whatever. I'm not knocking it. I think
there was good in it. I agree.
Also, like you said, there were a lot of things that weren't right, and no time period that we live in, each time period has its own woes and troubles and is no simpler than the other. It's just how we view it and how we want to perceive it and think back on it. They had their own troubles. We were in a Cold War, for crying out.
That's right. I can remember it wasn't as bad for me as it was in my mother. Well, she actually didn't finish high school, but just something I ought to get her to do, by the way, go get her GED and finish. So she had to quit and raise the family some, but dad finished. But she remembers those days of having to, hide under the desk. I don't know what that was going to do, to protect you from nuclear stuff, but wasn't as big a deal when I was in school, but it was still there with us.
I mean, we have our own version of that today. Instead of having like bomb shelter, like you were talking about attacks. I remember hearing my mom talk about it. Drills, bomb drills or whatever. We have our own drills of like lockdown drills. I mean,
yes, we do. That's right.
they could never dream of back then any more than if you explain to a kid today, what's a bomb drill? Well, you were in World War II and the Cold War. So it's like six in one hand, six in another. You're
That's
just
right.
one for the other, and it's how you deal with it. I mean, yeah, we might have more opportunity now, and women are working outside of the home, but then you have more issues with raising the kids and how do you take care of them and technology versus everybody was at home and you didn't have as much money. So I mean, you're trading out. So which one do you want to deal with? But,
I even had a professor in college that said she was actually led, I think, the administrator of the local welfare department, but she was a sociology professor, adjunct one there for us. And she had said, yeah, everybody used to have sort of the crazy aunt or whatever. And it didn't mean they were crazy, but it meant that maybe they had dementia, Alzheimer's or whatever. And said she might come downstairs and be with the extended family and say something really off the wall. We didn't think nothing about it. It was just Aunt so-and-so, and that's just who she was. And that was pretty common, back then. So like the Waltons TV show, which I heard that they trying to reboot that.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I didn't see that last night, but I may have to try to tune in and see it and see if it matches up to the old one. But but there are good things out there. You're right. I mean, there's and I know that, from that, you, like I said, you alluded to the divorce that you had at 26. And I'm sure that coming out of a background that says, oh, we don't ever divorce, that like I changed denominations, and I remember that was a big deal. But the folks, I had one great aunt that basically thought I was going to hell because I went from Pentecostal to Baptist. Now, thankfully, I had others that didn't feel that way and encouraged me. And but I'm just saying, it's just people's mindset, and so it's hard,
And when it goes to your core of what you were taught to believe and raised and what you fundamentally believe, it's challenging everything you've ever believed or known. So it's not an easy decision to switch that over and shift it,
It's even like reading different translations of the Bible. I was always brought up with the King James, and I think it's a beautiful poetic translation. And I have friends who I have a few that are hardcore King James only people that I love dearly, but I don't share their vision. That I don't have any guilt looking at the different translations. They're all helpful to me. It's a different mindset, what you believe about certain things. And I always tell people they're panicking, oh, there was a verse or two left out. Well, there wasn't really a verse or two left out. The other group might have actually added it. How do you know that? But if you study academics, you learn that while the Bible is one of the most trustworthy books that's out there, that's from a textual critical, textual criticism standpoint. So that is, but no, there's like I said, I know you had to.
It has a lot to do with what translation you're looking at as well, because then that's when you get into real academia and they start scrutinizing what was translated correctly and which one's more accurate. And if you're coming from Latin, Hebrew, or Greek, which that's a whole nother conversation. But
that's right.
That's a lot to be said for really scrutinizing it. So you are making sure you're having the closest and most accurate of what you're reading for what you're looking for when you do go to scripture. But anyway.
And I'm thankful that, and I have a congregation, even some of my lay leaders struggle with reading some, but I'm thankful that they understand the need to keep it simple and keep it about Jesus, but they're willing to dive deeper. I think that's a mistake. Some people either become eggheads, and some of my Reformed friends can be that way. They'd be so academic that they're over people's heads. But on the other hand, we are to dig deeper into the theology and know Jesus better. And
we are,
that was, we grow at that.
We can't stay on. Yeah, we can't stay on spiritual milk forever. So
that's right. So, and we're going to be challenged and pushed in things. And I served in a Baptist church that had a Reformed element, and they had said, we're Reformed and we're always reforming, which means that we're not saying that how we do things today is exactly how we're going to do them 10 years from now. We may study God's word and see, there's a better way to do that. We should change. And so, but change is hard for some people. I'm more flexible with it, but there's some folks that are, and I've told my congregation that I know some of you freak out when there's change. That's how God's wired you, and others are more free flowing. And there's good and bad in both sides, strengths and weaknesses in both groups. So, well, as you've, it looks like, you again, with the help of other people and the Lord, you navigated that. And I know that you've had death in your life, you've had other things. So what were some things that you found helpful? What would be some words of encouragement or advice you would give people who are maybe walking through a divorce or walking through death, and some things that they could, again, you don't have all the answers, but you know what? You have answers that some don't have because you've been there.
Right.
It's not theory, and it's not
share
academia. That's right.
Yeah, I can share the wisdom and the truth that I've gained and gleaned from the experiences, and that's the only thing. My ambition, my purpose is to share what I've learned and
Yes.
benefit of what I've had to go through. I mean, I wouldn't wish a lot of my experiences on anybody, but that doesn't mean I can't learn from them and share that truth and that wisdom. But I think a lot of what I've learned and what I'm fixing to say is universal in the sense that even though my tribulations may not be the same as someone else's and vice versa, but when you think of the idea of what tribulation is, tribulation is tribulation is tribulation, and suffering is suffering is suffering as far as how it makes us feel. Now, we may have different feelings tied to that specific example, but it's still the same idea. Idea. And then if you choose to be an overcomer, what's required to overcome whatever you're trying to overcome is exactly the same, no matter what you're overcoming. So the 5-step process that I'm fixing to talk about, I think, is applicable to many, many, many people. Because like we said, we're all going to go through something in this life. It most likely will probably be more than one.
Right.
So we all learn and use these things. And I feel like for me, I was able to do so because a lot of them I learned kind of early in life because of the disability. I had it my whole entire life. So I was always having to overcome. I'm not knocking someone that didn't have a disability and then all of a sudden did. It's just, I'm saying it's a very different process to not have a disability and then out of the blue finally have one. And you're kind of like culture shocked. You're like, whoa, what the heck? And like, what do I do now? As opposed to someone like me who has never known difference. So you're just kind of your second nature and you learn how to do it really well, hopefully.
Yes.
And so I always kind of had these tools in my tool belt because I had to learn them at an early age because of the constant, always permanent disability. And for me, obviously, the first of the 5 will be first and foremost, my faith. That's not a negotiable point in my life. It's my faith. It always has been my faith. It always will be my faith. I wouldn't be able to have these conversations if it wasn't for my faith. Now, for people that aren't faith-based, you need to believe in something, and we're not going to debate whether what you should believe in or not in this conversation. That's a whole nother thing. But even if you're not faith-based, these other 4 can help you. But I would suggest I am a proponent of faith. And so my faith is what's seen me through all the D's, the disability, the divorce, and the death of my husband, and continuing to see me through that. Because I'm still going through grief. I think our culture would like to think of it as linear. It's not linear.
No, it's
very
not.
fluid, very lucid, very flowy. And okay, you get past this and then wham, it comes back and gets you. Or, it's just very all over the place. And we don't like to think of that way because that means it's not neat and confined and not messy, but it's, and my perfectionist feathers would prefer it to be more neat, confined, but it's not. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. No matter how much they like it or not like it. But the next step for me was the second part of my process was and is what I would say life is a choice. If you think about life and how we live life, it really is a journey of stringing our choices together, because if we make one set of choices, you'll end up in one direction. If you make a totally different set of choices, you'll end up in another direction. So our choices equate to the path we take and where we end up on our journey. And we have to understand that life is a choice. Now, that's not to say they're not hard choices. They can be really, really, really hard choices, but still at the end of the day, you have to make that choice, whatever that is. And you can choose when you're given certain, situations. You may not have chosen. I didn't choose to be born blind. I didn't choose to have a lifelong disability. I mean, I was born with it, people. I mean, like, really, seriously, I didn't even know how to eat yet. Okay. And I already have this disability. We're babies. We don't know anything. And I didn't even know what that meant. And so I didn't have time to choose anything yet. I didn't know what a choice was or how to make them. And I did choose to walk away from my first marriage, but I did not choose his choices that created a situation that required for me to walk away. That was not my doing. That was his bad choices that made our marriage no longer healthy and tenable. And I definitely did not choose to lose the love of my life at 38 and have my two babies be without their father longer than they ever had him in his life.
Right.
I didn't choose any of that. We don't always get to be in control or choose the hand that we're dealt, but we do get to choose what we do with those circumstances. We can either let it define us, or we can choose to define it for ourselves.
Yes.
And I'll give an example of that. Think of it, whether it be goldfish, poker, spades, I don't care. Pick a card game. You're dealt however many cards that game requires you to be dealt, and you didn't necessarily choose it. You just get what you get out of the deck, and you don't get upset, hopefully too much. Excuse me. But if you are a strategic card player with the goal of winning the game, then you're going to know how to play that card well to help you reach a goal.
Yes.
So I have chosen and strive to not let my circumstances define me, but say, okay, this is what I've got. Now I'm going to go make a life and define it for myself.
Yes.
Now, is it sometimes hard to make those choices? Are there challenging days where you don't want to make those choices? Yes, but you're still in charge of your own choices. You may not be in charge of what you're given or everybody else's choices, but you do get to control our own actions and our own choices. So I've always chosen to say life is a choice, and I'd rather define it for myself.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense.
So that's my second one. Now, my third one is what I call mindset. To me, this is a harder one. Excuse me. Mindset is key. There's a reason why in our society we say mind over matter. And if you put your mind to it, you can do anything you want. It's absolutely true. How you think, how you process, how you perceive the world, whether you're positive or negative, or the world is half empty or half full, or you want to look for the sunshine amongst the rain clouds, no matter how hard it might be to find that one sliver of rain or sunshine, or find that silver lining, no matter how hard it might hide. If you'd rather focus on how crappy everything is in your life, or trying to find the few things that bring you joy or gratitude, even if it's the smallest thing of I got to walk outside today and have some fresh air on my face, whatever that is for you, I don't care, fill in the blank. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy to do that. I've struggled with that over the last 4.5 years at times, but we still need to try and do that as often as possible, because our mindset, I believe, is directly tied to what we're able to do and how we're able to stay true to the choices that we know we're supposed to make. If you're positive, then you're going to motivate yourself to do whatever you're called to do. If you're more negative, it's going to be harder for you to want to get up and do the work that you're called to do and get excited about what you've been purposed and created for.
Scripture, there's a scripture that says, as a man thinks, so he is. So, I mean, how you think and envision things is what you're going to do. You know, there was a college quarterback that was from your state that was a super gifted athlete, could throw a football 65 yards on his knees. Was an utter failure in the NFL because he didn't want to study and put his mind to it. But he had gift. I mean, he had a gift, big, strong dude, you know. So, yeah. And but he didn't achieve because he didn't have the mindset. He just didn't. Right. You know, and there's guys that's been half talented as he that have made a successful career because they had the mindset to do the work, you know.
Right. And I think we can't always control the thoughts and the feelings that come into our head, and that's fine, because our feelings and our thoughts is what makes us our humanity, and we're supposed to feel those things, and we're supposed to experience that, and we need to process them properly. But once we process them, like I'm still processing grief, and I probably always will. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's what you do with it that either helps you or hurts you.
Would you even say it could even motivate you to make, if you handle it right, to make better decisions or to further your life or the life of maybe your children in a better way if you handle that? As I like what you're saying, that grief's not completely over, but it doesn't have to dominate your life. It can help shape things if you process it properly. That's it.
Right. So there's nothing wrong with when you go through a crappy situation to have your emotions or your feelings, but you need to process them and then figure out what you're going to do with them. Are you going to let it hold you back, or are you going to let it motivate you, spur you forward, or not forward? I don't even like that word. I prefer to say continue on.
Continue.
You don't necessarily really go forward in grief. It's just you get through it. You don't. I don't know. Forward's always bothered me, but anyway, that's just my own personal thing. People use it, and that's fine. But I don't.
I worked in a medical group one time, but there was a delightful lady in probably her mid-60s whose husband had a stroke and had some weakness in his life. And eventually he passed away. I was one of those people that greeted people at the front door and took them to the doctor's office, wherever they needed to go, and usually put him in a wheelchair. And I remember when he passed, I thought, well, she's sad, but I think she's going to be free now, because she was still a fairly attractive lady for her age. She was a smart lady. She was a go-getter. And she grieved that loss, even though, I mean, I'm sure she could have remarried and could have had a happy life, but she grieved his death in a great way. And some people were fussing at her about that. And I said, you have to grieve it how you grieve it. But here's what happened. She eventually became a caretaker for other sick people and found joy in that. She
found a compassion for it because she saw what her husband went through.
Yes, and she excelled in it greatly. And so it, and it really helped her move through that.
And sometimes I think it's our experiences that help us realize the gifts that we've been given and talents, because until you do it, you don't think, oh, I might be good at that. Well, until you've experienced it, you don't know.
That's
and then
right,
come to find out that was one of maybe your talents, that, spiritual gifts that God had given you, and you just didn't realize it until you started having to do it.
Yeah, I tried 2 businesses earlier this year that totally failed at them, and I'm like, okay, well, I know not to do that. That's not. I'm not gifted to do that. That's
trial and error. Just keep working at it.
I've tried it,
But I mean, I just think mindset's so key, because it can really impact where we go and the trajectory of what we do or don't do. I mean, I'm not to say that I'm perfect at it. I have some really crappy days. I'm like, I'm going back to sleep. Screw this. And then, and sometimes we need that. And then you wake up with a better, you've, cleared out your mind, and you wake up with a more better slate, which goes into my other thing. The third, fourth. I get lost.
I got you. No, you're doing good.
I lose track. But fourth is self-care. And I think this is something that's very interesting for a lot of people in a lot of reasons. And I will admit, when I was younger, not that I'm young, but younger, and I was married to my husband that passed away, and I was not a young mom, but I had young kids, because I became a mom at a little bit later in life at 31 and 34 with my 2 kids. But a new mom and a younger mom. And of course, I had the bright idea, I have an 8-month-old girl. I need to go to grad school. That was great timing. But I lived to tell. And we had our son while I was in grad school, and I did my thesis with a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old who wasn't sleeping through the night. Like, oh my God, okay, kill me now. But no, I'm kidding. But I didn't do a lot of self-care at that time, because I was either taking care of the kids or trying to be with my husband, or I was cleaning the house, or I was thinking, oh my God, I need to be working on this deadline if I'm not doing it, but I'm trying to clean house. And if I'm not cleaning house and doing paper, I need to be with the kids. And if I'm not with the kids, I need to be working. It was just this constant flurry of, I had 3 major things in my life that if I felt like if I wasn't doing that one, I needed to be doing the other 2. And it was nuts for like 5 years. So I didn't have a lot of time for self-care. And even if I did, I felt guilty when I did it, because I should be doing something else. I think that's a problem for women. You're a man, and I can't speak to you guys how y'all feel about those things and how that affects y'all. But for women, I think it's a big struggle and a big guilt trip.
It is, yeah.
Like, oh my God, God forbid you take 5 minutes for yourself and close the bathroom door and like tell your 10-year-old, like, if you interrupt me, your threat, cherish your life, because if you open the door except for bleeding and dying, you're in trouble. Like, do not, no, go away. I love you, but go away for 5 minutes. Or whatever that version is for you. And my kids are older now, so what I needed when they were toddlers and newborns and preschoolers is very different from now. I have a middle schooler and an 8-year-old. But the value of self-care, I think, has been misperceived in our society for a very long time, because it's called self. So people think it's selfish, when it really isn't. It is probably the most selfless act you will do, because what self-care involves is anything pertaining to the care of oneself. I mean, we busy our lives, as we should, caring for everyone else. Why don't we think we need to care for ourselves? And a lot of times in caring for ourselves, it allows us to maintain balance and clarity and sanity.
Yes.
And to be centered. And you have to think of it as like we're a deep well, okay, of water, okay? And I don't know about guys. I'm just talking from a woman's perspective. Yeah. Women tend to wear a lot of hats. I'm not saying guys can't wear a lot of hats or have a lot of different, like I said, just keep in mind, I'm a woman and I'm speaking from my own experience. Sure. So I'm not a guy. I can't speak for you guys. But as a woman, we're mothers, we're wives, we're daughters, we're sister-in-laws, we're daughter-in-laws, we're friends, we're co-workers. We may be a caretaker. We may be running the household. We may be a friend. We may be a niece. We may be an aunt, whatever, fill in the blank. And so you have all these hats and all these roles, and you're hoping to lovingly be willing to care for your loved ones and care for them. And at the end of the day, you collapse into bed going, oh my God, I just put in a 15-hour day with no time for yourself to maybe even, I hate to admit it, take a shower, just human things, or eat a meal in peace, or go to the bathroom in peace, depending on what's going on in your life. Young moms out there know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And then we don't. And if we do, we're thinking all 5 million things are probably going on that we need to be attending to. But really, you're eventually going to run out of water. You're going to dry up and you're going to be empty. And you're literally going to have nothing left to give. And then all these great things you want to do for your loved ones, you're not going to be able to do. You're probably going to be more crabby and more irritated because you're out of balance. You're out of whack. And I'm not talking about mental health, like brain chemistry. I'm just talking about your soul and your spirit, because that's a whole conversation that requires other things. But self-care involves whatever we do as individuals, and it's going to be different from person to person because we're individuals and we're unique, and what fills each of our souls and our spirits back up are totally different from each other.
That's true.
Okay, confession, mine is chocolate. Mine is at the end of a day adulting is watching Hulu and Netflix and escaping into a wonderful drama. Like, okay, I watch a crap ton of TV. I hang out with my girlfriends. I meditate, I pray, I journal, I do Shutterfly, I listen to music, whatever. Those are my version. For someone else, it might be gardening. It might be working with their hands. It might be running a marathon. That will never be me. No, thank you. I'm good.
My brother does that. He's a great runner.
If I am getting across the street or I'm afraid for my life, but that's okay if that's not my thing. I have to find my own, as everyone else has to find their own. And whatever that is for them, as long as it's taking time to care for yourself. Mine's bubble baths. Okay. I like to relax in a bath while I listen to audiobook. But as long as you find something that helps put back into your well and rejuvenates you and refuels you and replenishes your soul, then you're doing self-care. I go to counseling. That's part of my self-care. Okay. No shame. But in doing our self-care helps us be the better version that we need to give our loved ones, and keeps us sane and keeps us happy and balanced and focused and centered, so that we can go forward and keep doing all these amazing things that we were called to do and supposed to do and want to do. And if we have good self-care, our mindset can stay on track, which means if our mindset stays on track, we can keep being diligent and good steward of the choices that we said we wanted to do. Because if your mindset's all screwed up because you're not getting self-care, you're not going to be focused on what you need to be choosing to do. So for me, they're all connected. The last one we've talked about a little bit that I think also plays in this, because no matter how good we are as individuals, or how intelligent or smart or self-motivating we may be, or whatever that adjective is that you want to throw in there, sometimes we all get stuck. The best people can even get stuck in different things. And so sometimes you need that extra resource. It could be financial resource. It could be monetary. It could be financial. It could be, physical. It could be social. It could be mental health. It could be business resource. If you're running a business, whatever that is, if you're finding yourself in a place where you're stuck in life, then get that extra help and get that resource that's going to help you get unstuck, so that you can find time to do your self-care, to keep your mental state and mindset on track, to keep making the choices to fulfill the purpose and what you were called to do and what you want to do in life, to go where you want to go. I think and I forgot to say something about self-care, so I'm going to backtrack for a second. I apologize. I think what's interesting about self-care is, in the whole mental health and mental fitness and wellness industry, is a lot of things, like you said, especially in faith-based communities, but also not just faith-based communities, but people in general, that's such a taboo. And it's considered oh, if they know I do that, or I might be on a medication that's helping me, or I might seek out counseling or therapy, then they might think of me, or I'm weak, or I'm vulnerable. Well, we're all vulnerable.
Yeah, we are. That's right.
It's part of the human experience. And just because you're asking for help doesn't make you weak. It's actually showing strength, because you're recognizing that you need something and you're not afraid to get it, so that you can maintain your health, so you can maintain what you want to do in life. And what's interesting about this conversation is, for a lot of years, I think it was taboo and no one really wanted to talk about it the way it should and give it its due attention. But what's funny, and probably a blessing in disguise of the pandemic, is no one could say, well, it's just them going through it. No, the whole world was going through it. Okay?
That's right. That's
there wasn't
exactly
not one person in this world that was not going through the pandemic. So it couldn't be segregated into sections of well, it's just them. No, it was everybody.
Oh, everybody.
I challenge someone to tell me how they did not go through the pandemic. Okay, good luck. You're lying.
Yes.
But so it brought, because everybody was going through it, it brought so many things to the forefront that maybe had been hidden before, or was more easily hidden, that everybody was going through the same stuff. So everybody was looking for ways of handling self-care. And it became such a trendy topic of self-care and mindset and mental health and mental fitness and mental wellness, that everyone was trying to find ways to cope better because they were all affected by it.
Yes.
So it became like socially more acceptable because we were all going through it. So I think in a way, these ideas that I've been mentioning of minds of mental health profession and the mental fitness and the well-being and all that stuff became actually more socially acceptable because there was no other options because everybody was doing it. So maybe that was a positive that we would have never been able to open up a dialogue and conversation about in normal acceptable setting like we did. Not saying it couldn't have been before, but not in the way it has been over the last, I don't know, what are we at, almost 2 years?
Yes.
Because of the pandemic. Because the way it everybody.
I have one of my favorite music artists, Sarah Beth Cohagen, and she's also now, I think, she didn't hit it big, so she's also, I think, there's now a trained therapist, lives in Nashville, but she had a song about an aunt who had become a nun and had some difficulty there, got into some addictions and other things, and got disillusioned with that, and later left it, became a painter. And she even has a line in the song where she says her right hand wouldn't so much tell the truth, so she learned to paint right with the left. And it was I talked to her later about this aunt. She was a interesting character. She said, but the title of the song was 3 Sips of Beauty. And it would just say that each day this lady took 3 sips of beauty. And I'm finding in my life, when I'm traveling, I listen to this Christian radio station that actually plays some more of the classical, inspirational type stuff. But it fills me up because it's orchestrations and it's beautiful chord groups that are singing some really difficult, harmony pieces. And that beauty just soaks into me, and helps me. Or it's like you say, seeing a beautiful sunrise, or last year gardening helped me. I haven't done as much of it this year, but I even found the other day that I was able to harvest a fresh tomato. Even though the garden I had given up, only haven't done anything with it in months, but I was able to harvest some peppers and things. And that was almost like the mercies of the Lord and you every day. Even though I didn't work this like I should have, he still blessed me with a few pieces of produce. So, but yeah, I agree. Take 3 sips of beauty every day. Yeah.
Find something that helps you refuel,
Yes.
And then even if that requires getting resources. So for me, like I said, it's the faith, it's my knowing that life is a choice and being willing to define it for myself. The mindset and trying to maintain a healthy mindset. Like I said, that's not always easy. I'm not saying that it is, but sometimes I find myself at more end of the spectrum of this really sucks versus, hey, this is actually for right now going in a good direction or whatever. So I'm not saying that's not a difficult thing, but it's something we can all work on. But it is important to be mindful of your mindset and make sure it's what you need to help you do what you want to do. And then self-care and then resources. So those 5 things have been what some I learned early on and some I learned a little bit later or honed it, that I think were already in place because of the disabilities that were ready for me to use when I got divorced and then lost my husband at 38. And those are the things that I rely on now. So,
and don't you think that sometimes
that's my process.
Getting unstuck, or what we have to do is that that's something. If you're depressed, you're stressful, you've got to make yourself get up and go do that thing. That is self-care, because it'd be real easy just lay in bed all day.
That's
and you
the thing
can't
about
do that.
Depression. You're so depressed that it's hard to motivate because you're depressed. So it's kind of a catch-22 on that. But yes, absolutely. You need to find a way to make that choice to.
That's right. You may have to have a loved one that comes along and says, that lovingly, so they come on, let's go. I want you to come with us. And we got to have those people in our life that are willing to call us out in a loving way and help us do maybe what we don't want to do but need to do. So. Well, this has just really been awesome, Michaela, and I want to share with you again. You said you've written 9 books? Is that right? And you're presently working on one, aren't you?
I'm always working on something. I have 10 more chapters left on this one that hopefully will be released in February. Okay. I have 5 different series that I'm building out right now, and I might add a 6th one. I don't mind walking you through all my books if you want, but the most recent, actually, that's not true. Not the most recent one, because one came out in October, but I would be more accurate to say the one that dropped in June called Now I See is actually the book that is the beginning of that series that walks everyone through exactly what I've been explaining over this podcast. What it was like to be being born blind and the miracle of it, and then growing up with a disability, and then meeting my first husband, and then getting what that was like, and then getting divorced, and then meeting my second husband, who was the love of my life, and then the process of losing him, and then the lessons that I've learned from that. And it's about 31 chapters. So.
Well, I know that you have a couple of websites. One, www.myheart myheartfeltmeditations.com, and then the one that people want to book you as a speaker. And I think people listening here will agree with me that you are a great speaker and you have a lot to offer. And it's certainly a benefit of our time to listen to the things you have to share. And that is thrivinginallthings.com. That would be a way to book you. We're going to put a slideshow up where, as when the music fades away, you'll be able to see that, and or pause your video. We'll have it also on the podcast there in the info section where you can find that, and that will but you can go, I think, is it with myheartfeltmeditations.com, they can find your books and everything there, can they not? Is that right?
Right. Nice social media links, Facebook,
Yes.
Instagram, and all things like other podcasts and media stuff that I've done and whatnot. But
Yes.
I don't know. For a quick overview of what I've written, I did my first book in 2010 was a collection of poetry based off of scripture. I may go back to my roots on that at some point, but I have too much on my plate right now, quite honestly.
I got you.
Oh, I have too much work on anything else, please no. And then I did a series on motherhood, and the second book in that series just dropped in October. And it was just when I was going through becoming a new mom and a young mom, I lived 26 hours away from all my girlfriends pretty much because we
Wow.
were in New Hampshire. And so it was just what I was going through as a mom. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, I'm probably not the only one that's thinking this. So like, maybe if I share my journey. So I did that series. And then I did one, and that's called Take a Sip, Take a Breath and Go series. And then in June of 2020, during COVID and shutdown, it kind of all started running together when we got released. But I did a series that called Scripture, Scripture, Spirituality in Our Culture Today. And it's just a series that talks about things I've observed and learned and my own experiences and like things that I think are interesting about our beliefs and our faith and our culture today. And the second book will hopefully drop in February. And that's does a really deep dive on what it would be like to be makers of difference, like Daniel in the words of Romans 12, 1-2. And it's going to be called The Ripple Effect, So that I work on, and then I have a Read the People series that's about what America's supposed to be about. And then I have a series, not children's series, but for my children, that is really about instilling in them what I want, wise words and truthful words and lessons that they can take with them as they grow. And it has a lot to do with being intentional, how we raised and what we instill in our kids. So I think that's all.
Awesome.
Oh, then now I
variety.
See one. That's why now I see one. I already mentioned that one. That's why I was like, I'm missing one.
Yeah.
No, what happened was people ask me a lot of times, well, why do you write? Like, how long have you written? What inspires you? I think that's the fun thing about creativity, whether it's art or music or the written word or acting or whatever. Creativity and the inspiration for creativity can come from anywhere when you're a creative person. It really can. I mean, I got one of my ideas from a book that I wrote. It was a part of a series. It's just what I wanted to write. I was on a beach vacation with my kids, playing with my kids. Okay. I was in the Atlantic Ocean when I got the idea, for crying out loud. So, I mean, you can just really get it anywhere. And I've always written, I feel like it's what I'm called to do. When I'm not writing, I'm thinking about it. I'm actually obsessing about it, probably, truth be told. And so it's just who I am and what I do. And now this is a little moment of truth or dare, a confession. It's probably not a good thing that I do this, but I had a roommate in 2006 and she watched a show that some people might know. It's called Sex and the City. It was on HBO. It's probably a guilty indulgence, whatever, but I like it. Not saying go watch it if y'all don't, but and it's a fictitious character played by Sarah Jessica Parker. And she wrote a column about romance and dating and gender identity and, things in our culture and a little about sex, of course. But what it taught me was, I was like, wait a minute, if this fictitious character can write a column about her passions and her interests, then hey, I can write little articles or essays or chapters on my passion about faith. And then when I became, I can do this on motherhood. And then when I got my master's in political science, like, hey, I can do this on politics, and just have a light-hearted, kind of fresh, humorous, comical place where people can come and read and just start a dialogue and a conversation about these hard topics, So anyway.
I think that's necessary. I think we need to be able to discuss these things without being all in angst and anger. And I like the humorous aspect that you throw in there as well. So this is awesome. You have some great resources, and I would just say everybody may not can achieve what Michaela has done here, but you probably have some way that you can make a difference. And don't be we all have some kind of disability. Maybe it's an emotional pain that's crippled us. There's something there. Just don't let it stop you. as a friend of mine said, stop stopping. A lot of times you're moving forward, you have an obstacle, and you stop stopping, keep going. That's
but there's also, I don't want to get lost in all this motivation. There are days where I do have to take a time out for self-care and stop for a little bit to refresh and reboot, and then you can go forward and be more productive. So there's nothing wrong with needing to take a step back at times as well.
I'm a tri-vocational pastor, so I have found out, and my mother's always telling me, take time for yourself. And for me, it might be listening to music. I've been watching the old TV series on Prime Video, Route 66. I've really enjoyed that series, and I'll watch them sometimes on my tablet at bed at night. And of course, sometimes I fall asleep before that is over. So next night I pick up where I left off, and eventually I'll watch things. It's just like they were reading books. People say they're too busy. Well, in between ball games that my kids are playing, I can get in 10 minutes of reading, and 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there eventually adds up to,
which is why a lot of people are like, wow, you write long books. I do. A lot of my books are really long. I'm not known for my conciseness. You probably figured out for how much I can talk in the interview.
No, I'm not concise either.
But I would rather write a lot of little chapters that are easier to digest and like sound bites, because like you said, we're all busy. Some people, now I can't, like I would never be able to read one chapter in 10 minutes because of my vision. But okay, aside from my issue, most people can read 3 or 5 pages in 5 or 10 minutes. Like, oh, wow, I knocked something out. I got a small thing of it done. And so I think it's easier for people to process and keep their attention when it may be more chapters, but shorter than versus half the chapters and you get lost in 40 pages. Like, where did I leave off? Like, forget it. So I do tend to write a lot of chapters, but they are short like that, so that busy people can knock out, 1 or 2 in a quick amount of time period. I think that works better for people.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I really do. So that's why I'm trying to get down to, if as I can, preaching 30-minute sermons, because people are used to a 30-minute program or whatever. Even though I would say that hour-long programs that don't have commercials in them anymore, that are streamed, or maybe 40 minutes. So I rarely go beyond 40 minutes. So, but yes, so that makes a lot of sense. So, well, we're going to have all that info, like I say, up on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube. And again, we'll have it in the info section of the podcast.
I would like to impart to your audience in closing a piece of advice and kind of wrap it up in what's called a call to action per se. If you want the trendy lingo around it. Realize that life is a choice, so be willing to define your life for yourself and know that you get one shot at it. So live it well and give it your best shot and strive to thrive as you journey on.
Amen. Awesome. I think those are awesome closing words. So again, again, everybody can check that out. It'll be on the screen. Thank you so much, Michaela, for being here with us today. It has just been a delight. I have learned things that are going to enrich and better my life. So I have personally benefited, and I know our audience is going to as well.
Well, it's been an honor to be here, and I hope I can bless somebody and contribute to the dialogue and conversation.
Hopefully we can get back to
wisdom and further their own journey.
Hopefully we can get back together at some point, maybe, and we'll follow up. And
I would love that.
Maybe talk about one of your books in the future. So,
like maybe the one that comes out in February would be a good time.
Awesome, because I'm super excited about that book and want to plan to get that, because I mean that is an intriguing subject to me. When you told me about it, we had our conversation. I was like, oh, I want that one. I definitely do. So.
Well, I'll get you the information and maybe we can got tongue-tied. Connect again.
Wonderful. You're an easy interview. You love to share, and you've shared some awesome info. So again, everybody look that up. As music will begin playing here in a moment, and you can see the resources there. Please go buy some of those. Read her website, get connected, and I know it will enrich and bless your life. So till next time, take care. God bless.
While walking in the woods one day, not so long ago, I saw an old discarded tie from long, long ago. And there in its circle, wildflowers did grow. Bloom where you are planted, and God will make you grow. Bloom where you
planted, and God will make you grow. Tell other people that Jesus loves them so. Tell them how he came to earth and died to set them free, and bloom where you are planted, wherever that might be.